Welcome to this exclusive 4-part series on David Adair. I got the opportunity to meet with David on November 28, 29. I spent 2 days at his home where he kindly allowed me access to his documentation and shared his incredible stories. So what you're going to hear is 4 parts that describe his story, beginning with his background, where we talk about what connections he made early in his background due to his extraordinary synchronistic experiences with the father of the retired 4-star General Curtis LeMay and later with the mother of the astronaut Neil Armstrong. So in part 1, we are going to be looking at some of the documentation that David shared with me about his encounters and meeting with General Curtis LeMay, and he shows how his mother did work at the hospital where General LeMay's father, Irving LeMay, actually died in 1965, and that's how his mother became acquainted with General LeMay, and later General LeMay played a pivotal role in the development of rockets that David Adair was building while still at high school. We're going to be looking at what it was that happened to him, how he got to become someone that was building rockets at a very early age, was being sponsored by various figures associated with NASCAR racing. Then later on, he began winning prizes. At high school, got to meet with Professor Stephen Hawking, and finally the connection with Curtis LeMay becomes important when it came to the development of his rocket he called PITHM. So now we begin with part 1.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
So I'm with David Adair. It is November 29 for the discussion of his extraordinary life, and he is starting off with his background. And David, why don't you continue with some of the documentation you have to
Well, let's start off with the very beginning. I guess I was about 12 years old, and I would go to bed, 11 o'clock at night, and fall asleep, and these dreams started coming. And these dreams were kind of different than any other dream I've had. They, it was more in a form of like a heads-up viewer. You could look through it. But it had all these writings and calculations on them, and actually they turned out to be algorithms. Back then, most people hadn't even heard of algorithms. This was, let's see, this would be about 1968 when it started, the dreams. And what was different about these dreams is that I didn't remember them that well. I'd wake up and try to write a few things down, but I wasn't organized or ready for it. Well, my mother stepped in, and I was telling her about the dreams, and she said, well, we can make it easier for you to remember. So she brought a big artist pad in and a pen, and then I said, well, I need to see because it's dark when I wake up. So she did something really unusual. She took the wires off the end of my lamp and cut it off, and she made an open ground. And I said, well, what good is that? And she said, watch this. You could touch the lamp and it'd come on. Touch it and go off. There's no such thing on the market at the time. I said, dang, I think you might have just made a patent here. And we didn't do anything with it, but I had a touch lamp at that time, which they wasn't even for sale. So at 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd wake up and I touched the lamp. It would come on. I had a big artist pad, and I sketched down all the stuff I remembered, because it's a good thing, because then I'd roll back over, touch the lamp, go off, and I'd go back to sleep. Well, next morning I wake up and I couldn't remember anything. Looked at the artist pad, and there's all the writings, and I remembered every bit of it as soon as I saw it. And I recopied some of it just to get the lines in order, so it's in a chronological order form. And this is where it gets interesting. Go back to sleep the next night. Just like reading a book, it picks right up where you left off. That's strange for a dream, I think. Because normally, dreams would overlap each other, whatever. No, this thing was like a continuing book. You leave off an expression, and when you go back to sleep, you pick right back up on that expression and keep on going. And I thought, dang, that's kind of odd. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night, write stuff down, wake up the next morning, don't remember it, look at it, remember everything, write it all back down again. And that kept going for 93 pages consecutive. And when I got done, I had a notebook full of this stuff. And I would look at it and go, what is all that? And then...
So how old were you when you were getting these dreams?
12. And then I was trying to remember to make sense of it. And then I remembered all these books I read. Because now we're going to back up a few years earlier, when I'm about 6 or 7. I would go into the local library, I remember this clear as day, and I'd go over to the 600 section, which is all the technical books, and I'd pull them down and read them. And Mrs. Hunt came in. Mrs. Hunt was the librarian. She's about 76 years old then. And she looked at me and she goes, you reading all these books? And I answered her, but I didn't realize it sounded like a sarcastic answer, but it wasn't. I said, well, there's no pictures in them. So yes, I am reading them. She says, how much of this stuff do you remember? I said, all of it. Really? Well, being Mrs. Hunt, a Missouri woman showed me, she reached over my head and she pulled this book out and she opens up. What's this book say? Well, it would help to know the title. And she went, oh, okay. So she gave me the title, Singularities and Beyond. I went, oh yeah. What page are you on? She goes, 93. So I sat there and I go, oh, a singularity is the collapse of a black hole. And when the event horizon, which is the opening, collapses in on itself, then it will stretch out to millions of miles long and become known as a singularity. And she slams the book shut. She goes, okay, that's it, word for word. You knew that? She goes, can you do that to any book? I said, pick a book. She picks another book, goes to the page, tell me what the page number is. I'll tell her what it says. She closes the book back. She goes, how many of these books have you read in this section? All of them. All 600 sections? I said, yeah.
And you're 6 or 7 years old?
Now I'm 7 years old now. She said, have you told anybody about this? And I said, no, not a person, not a soul. She said, good, don't. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell your mother. Don't tell anybody. Because if you do, it's going to be problems for you. They're going to be scared of you. I said, aren't you scared of me? She goes, no, I'll find you a hoot. That's Mrs. Hunt. She said, are there other books you'd like to read that's not in this library? Because we were in Welch, West Virginia. I mean, not exactly a booming metropolis. It was number 10 Pocahontas Coalfield. I was in the Pocahontas Coalfields. I was born in District 10. Yeah, just like Hunger Games, District 10. So, she said, well, don't tell anybody you're doing this, and I can help you out. Because she was the head librarian, she could order any book she wanted, as many as she wanted. So she had me fill out a wish list, and she found all these books for me from all over the country, all over the world. They come into the library. She'd check them out to me. I'd read them, and then we send them back and get others. I went through hundreds of books, and that was really handy because what I read in those books I applied to what I was getting in these dreams, and guess what? They matched. I was able to finish out the algorithmic expressions. And then...
So in the dreams, I mean, you were seeing, what, equations, or you were seeing...
like looking up through a heads-up viewer where it's transparent, it would just appear right in front of me. And then there's times, some of them were connected, like quadratic equations. They'll be laid out like this. And so, whatever it was nice enough to correlate them into, if they led to another pattern or to another expression, it would do so.
Okay, so you're having these dreams.
Yeah, and they're coming in all the time, and I'm just recording it.
Right, and you're reading these books.
Yeah, right,
and you're
I read these books about 6 years ago, but my memory started focusing on what I read 6 years ago, and coupled with what I was seeing right now, it was like getting the owner's manual of how this thing works. So you put it together. It tells you how to assemble it together. And
so where do you think the dreams were coming from? Was it your
I had no
subconscious?
idea. I just go to bed and they come in. But then the dreams took a strange turn, literally. The dreams didn't stay flat two-dimensionally. They started curving like this until you got three-dimensional drawings of this stuff. So I went from two-dimensional to three-dimensional drawings. And then I could roll it I think about it, I could roll it like what you call CAD-CAM, computer-aided design. But this is all in my dreams. None of this is 1966, 67, 68. None of this stuff existed. And I'm rolling it through and I'm getting it all written down, and it finally started making sense out of it. And then the next thing was applying what I saw on the formulas from theoretical into applied science, and that's where it gets tricky. Because now you got to take it from a concept to a 3D dimensional physical something you're building. And the only thing I could come up with was what I was seeing. I kept going down a propulsion system. And finally I started looking at it as a singular propulsion, and then it became obvious. It's thrust, a thrust design. So it's a rocket engine. And I thought, wow, this thing's a rocket engine. So let's build a rocket. So started building rockets.
You're 12 years old, you started...
Right, I started building these small rockets. Started off, bought the stuff off the shelf, Estes rockets. I remember the man that owned the company is called Vernon Estes. He used to be a real estate guy and started a little model rocket company. Thing became wildly successful. But I could see where it was going. So I started flying some of his rockets, but they weren't powerful enough. They didn't go up high enough. But what they were good for, I'd shoot them up 1,500, 2,000 feet, and when they come back down, they had streamers behind them, and I could use the stopwatch and get upper wind drifts, and I could calculate winds and speed drifts before I launched bigger ones. So I didn't have the heart to tell Vernon Estes his big powerful rockets were just streamers for me, so I could get calculations on my bigger ones. So I wrote him a letter and told him, you make a nice little rocket, but if you did this and this to it, it'd be better. Well, I got a letter back from him saying, how many of these rockets of mine have you flown? And I said, just 3 or 4 of them, He said, if I sent you the whole catalog full and the motors to boot, God, that's a lot of money. I said, yeah, I could fly them and tell you what I think of them. So I got this big box from Estes Rockets, and it was the whole catalog. So I put this thing together. Now I got rockets all over the place. And then I could build my bigger ones. But the bigger ones, all that he had was solid propellant. I needed something much bigger, much powerful. So I had to move up to another grade called liquid propellant, and more specifically known as cryogenic fluids. These are fluids that are fuel, but they start at 325 degrees below zero. Cryogenics. Liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen. And the reason they're so cold is because we can compress so much fuel into the liquid form that when the engines run, the expansion rate on it is unbelievable. Like expansion rate on a hydrogen cube would be 150,000 BTUs. That's a lot. That.
And what's a BTU?
Well, a British thermal unit. To put it in something you can easily understand, that's a big fireball, big as a living room. So I thought, yeah, I could get some thrust out of that. So I started building into the cryogenic fluids. Then I needed more sophisticated equipment because now you're going to need all kinds of materials, aluminum, aircraft aluminum, in some cases titanium, all kinds of stuff for the engine housing. So I didn't have anything like that, and then this is where fate steps in, I guess, or whatever. Let me back up to my parents. My parents, my mother was the daughter of the mine superintendent. That's like a governor. I mean, that's a very powerful position. So my grandfather was the mine superintendent. And his daughter, my mother, fell in love with a coal miner. Well, she wanted to marry him. And the mine superintendent looked at my dad and said, you know, I don't need for my grandchildren to be fatherless, because you lose a lot of people in the mines then. I mean, losing 120 miners in an accident is normal. So he told my dad, he said, I understand you're good at auto mechanics. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy that old service station down there at the bottom of the hill, and you're going to open it up and run it as a garage. And that'll be your living. Get you out of the mines. So my dad said, okay, that's a good deal. My dad was, he never made it past 5th grade. He was a functional illiterate. My mother taught him to read and write. But boy, when he learned to read and write, his ability in mechanics was unbelievable. He's just super gifted at it. So he opened his garage, lots of business, a lot of customers. Dad would fix 10, 15, 18 cars a day. And they stayed fixed. So people kept coming back. And Dad suddenly had a major business. And then the one set of customers that came in, they wouldn't bring their cars in until 3 or 4 in the morning. And I remember my parents putting blankets up over the windows and nailing them in place. I thought, what the hell? They didn't want anybody to see where the lights are on in the garage, because these cars would pull into the garage. They'd have 200-gallon tanks in the trunk, and it wasn't gasoline. They were moon runners. And a gallon of moonshine weighs 9 pounds. So a 200-gallon tank, you got 1,800 dead pounds in your trunk. So these cars had to be powerful to outrun the revenuers carrying that kind of weight. So my dad would start modifying their engines. And these were big engines to begin with. 392 Chrysler Hemi engines, 426 Chrysler Hemi engines. Enormous power, 600, 700, 800 horsepower. So Dad would fix up their distributors, move them to dual ignition, dual points. A lot of power. And the revenuers are trying to figure out where these cars are coming from, because they chase them and they can't catch them. Even though they're dragging 1,800 pounds of dead weight in the trunk, they still outrun them. And these drivers became very skilled at curvy mountain roads at high speeds. What we didn't know was that was the birth of the NASCAR drivers. These drivers that drove this moonshine, they became NASCAR stars. Buddy Baker, A.J. Foyt, Fred Lorenzen. These are all old names, but they were moonshine runners, and then they became NASCAR drivers. Crazy thing you ever saw. Buddy Baker, all these people. So they paid my dad in cash. That's all they carried was cash. And so my dad got really fast at working on car engines. He wanted to get them in there, get them done, get them out. So the revenues don't catch them in the morning. So this car came by one day in the middle of the day. It broke down. Had a guy in it. He was coming from Detroit. He's on his way to Daytona, Florida. And he says, I'm going to go down there and race. My dad said, well, that's nice. He said, your carburetor is messed up. It was a Spicer carburetor. Those things were huge. They had water jackets around them. Looked like a commode flushing when you step on it. Very complicated carburetor to change. Takes about a day. My dad looked at it and he told the guy, he said, I'll change it within an hour. And the guy said, are you serious? Can I watch that? I said, sure. So they were out in the front of the garage. Dad's changing the carburetor out. And the man asked my dad, said, do you always work this fast? And he goes, well, when I can see what I'm doing, he didn't get the joke. Because it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon where Dad would be working at 4 in the morning, can't see nothing. So the man watched him change it. In 45 minutes, my dad was done. By himself on his carburetor. And that guy said, incredible. He said, I'm going down there to race. I'd like to hire you as my mechanic. Dad said, yeah, what'd I do? He said, just what you're doing up here, but down there at the beach. Dad said, yeah, I can do that. And so the man sticks his hand out and goes, hi, my name is Lee Petty. And he will soon have a son named Richard, the greatest NASCAR driver in all of history. So the Petty family and our family hooked up at that moment. My dad packed me and my brothers up, and we were all babies, and we left West Virginia and went to Daytona Beach, Florida. And I grew up in the NASCAR world, whether I wanted to or not. And I had a thing for mechanics as well. So my dad put me on tearing down engines. These are big engines. These are NASCAR, Detroit locomotives.
And how old were you when you moved down to Daytona?
Let's see. I was 2 years old.
2 years old.
So.
And so the incident with the school teacher?
The
librarian?
That was back up in West Virginia when we went back up the second time.
Oh, I see.
But went down there, and Dad, they knew something was up with me. My mother did, because I was only 2 years old, and my model had a model rocket playing with, of course. It fell down behind the refrigerator. I'm only 2. Actually, I'm not even 2. I'm 20 months old. And my mother's watching me, and she goes, watch that, baby. You can't get that rocket. Watch him. So I grab a mop, and I reach behind the refrigerator with the mop and drag my rocket out to me, and then put the mop back. And my mother turned to my dad and said, something not right about this kid. 20 months olds don't do that. He done looked at the problem, recognized what the solution was, and did it. Dad said, yeah, if he keeps that up, I'm going to put him to work in the engines. Sure enough, when I'm 7 or 8 years old, I start working on car engines. And I mean, we ain't talking little spark plug tune-ups. We're talking about removing heads, pulling crankshafts out, changing pistons. I mean, and I had a honer. The honer was heavier than I was. I had to have another adult pick the honer up to line up in the hole so I could move it. That's why a friend of mine that says, for a guy that's a rocket scientist with pencil and paper, where'd you get arms like that? And I said, well, that's from honing engine blocks. You build up some muscles. So they said, dang, you did a lot of engines. Yeah, I did. So by the time I was 13, I had already built a couple hundred engines probably. And one of my engines that I ran across the dyno tester, that's where you set an engine in place at the stand. You hook up radiator hoses and fuel lines, and it's just like it's sitting in a car, but it's on a stand. And you can run that engine to death.
And when you say you built these engines, are these engines that are based on kind of conventional engines, or was this based on the dreams you were getting?
No, these are conventional engines. I'm just working for my dad. He's working for NASCAR and Petty, working for Petty. And actually the sponsor was Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge, and Chrysler. So they were providing all the financial support. And that's where a couple interesting things happened in the garage. Two things I remember really clear. You never guess what the number one killer was of a NASCAR driver. You say, car wreck, No, drowning. What? They come down US 1 on the backstretch. They're doing about 160 miles an hour. And they turn on the south turn and come out on the beach. And the cars are stock cars, literally off the conveyor lines of the big three, Chrysler, Chevrolet, and Ford. And they had very mushy suspensions, independent coil springs, and they would lean over in that high-speed turn, and sometimes their fenders or the bumpers would catch the sand. The car would flip and roll, and would roll upside down out in the ocean, and before you can get the driver out, he drowns. And God almighty, never heard of such a crazy thing. Check it out. It's in NASCAR's historical facts. They'll show you pictures of cars rolling over up on their roofs in the ocean. Well, my dad lost a rookie driver one time. He really liked him. And he was young, and he was like 19. He drowns. My dad had a knife. He couldn't cut him out of there quick enough to keep him from drowning. So my dad was kind of pissed about that. He said, there's got to be a better way to do this. So my dad went over to this big old, some big old commercial truck. He cuts the damn relief springs off of it. He brings the springs into the shop. He welds them onto the frames. Then he takes a floor jack and he bends them in the opposite direction, kind of like the way you do a backward S-curve bow. And what happens is, when the car would come around the south turn, and the car wants to roll over to the centrifugal force, these bars would flex back, right the car back up, and they could do what the Japanese call drifting today. They could drift around the south end and outrun everybody, and you don't drown. So the sponsor came in, Chrysler. They looked at that and they said, you want to give us a drawing on the blackboard, Fred? So my dad draws these bars out, and they said, what is the force moving through that? So, well, it's the torque of the centrifugal force. So, when Chrysler comes out with a patent that neither GM or Ford can have. It's a 100-year patent, and it's called torsion bars. And Chrysler's the only one that had them. Chrysler, Dodge, and Plymouth did not mush in a turn. They leveled out. And that's where the torsion bars came from. $1 billion patent. Just went right through us. Well, that's the first thing I noticed that was kind of interesting about NASCAR. So I built another engine, and I've been doing some things to the engines. I could change the stroke on the pistons make the rods longer, shorten the skirts down, get more power stroke. And I noticed my engines are starting to win. And Lee Petty's driving them, and then his son Richard learned to drive. And they started winning a lot of the big Grand Champion, where you win first place in 4 different or 5 different events. And then there was something else I noticed about the engines. Dad always had me pull the heads off. So I pulled the heads off after cars ran nearly 7,000 RPM. That's maximum RPM for internal combustion engines of that time. Anything runs more than 7,000 RPM, it's going to fly apart. It just can't take it. But 7,000 RPM, and you run that for 3 or 4 hours solid, like in a race, that's equivalent to 100,000 miles of a normal engine on the road. So they're looking for things, wear and tear and stuff. And something I noticed about the heads, they had this curve over top each piston. And I said, the pistons are pounding out a curve of their own. And Dad said, what's it look like? I said, I don't know, let's half bubble, a dome. So it's a dome shape. And he said, why don't you take a set of heads and mill out the dome shape ahead of it and see how it behaves? I did, but then the problem was, I said, got a problem with the spark plug. He said, well, take the spark plug out of the side of the head and mount it down through the valve cover on top. And I did, and it worked. And what you had was that, yeah, you might cut that. You know what? Let the answer machine take it. So, what I didn't know, or my dad didn't know, when we put that spark plug in the top of the head, the birth of the Hemi engine was there. That's what Hemis look like. Their spark plugs aren't on the side of the head. They're up on top going down through the valve cover. So here come the same Chrysler people that took pictures of the torsion bars, took pictures of this, and Chrysler gets a 100-year patent on the Hemi. If you notice, GM and Ford never came out with a Hemi. They couldn't. They got a patent. So they had 2 back-to-back patents. Torsion bars, Hemi heads. And they started dominating the races. Now something I noticed, I'm not sure why this is, but the dome heads allowed, I guess, the expansion rate of the dome. It did something unusual. Remember 7,000 RPM was fast as it could rev? Not the Hemis. Hemis went to 14,000 RPM. Twice what a normal engine does. And it's cruising at 10,000 RPM. Just cruising. Where other engines are blowing apart. So imagine that speed that you had. You had such an advantage. That's why, man, in the first 30, 40 years of NASCAR, the dominating champion was Chrysler, Plymouth, Dodge. And that's all that the Pettys drove was those 3 makes. And
so that was your background?
Yeah, that was my background. So I did all that, and Richard and Lee Petty was looking at me, especially Richard, and he said to his dad, Lee, he said, Dad, we can't give David any credit for these engines because that man over there named Bill France will hang us all from the tree outside because he's chairman of NASCAR and they got a child work law. David's only 12. He can't be building these engines and winning Grand Nationals with them. He said that Bill France will hang us all. So I said, you got a problem with that with David? I said, nah, I don't care. I'm just glad I can help in here and learn this stuff. And Richard said to his dad, let's do something for him. What do you want, David? Anything we can do? And I looked around that place and went, could I have the shops at night? And they said, give him a set of keys and security codes. And so I have now a full-blown NASCAR racing shop at my disposal. Now you take a NASCAR shop and a NASA rocket shop, and you set them side by side, and they are identical. They got to have the same machines, benders, rollers, splitters, welders, grinders, to create the bodies of the car and the bodies of the rockets. It's the same. Because we had, and our materials, stainless steel, aircraft aluminum, titanium, all the stuff, we had the same metals. And then fuels. We were running drag racers. So we had liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, liquid nitrogen, kerosene. We had everything. Same fuels. So it was not much of a stretch to go from building a car to building a rocket. It was the same thing. Both of them are designed for speed. Just as fast as you can go. So
you're 12 years old, you're given this
I'm 12 years old and I've got
to this nurse test shop.
Yeah. So people go, well, how do you build such sophisticated rockets? It's because of the shop I had, dude. My little side job of building car engines suddenly evolved into this, wonderland of machines and tools, and I know how to use them all. And so I started building my rockets. And my first cryogenic pumper, first big rocket I built, stood about 10 feet tall, and it had cryogenic pumps. And I'm able to get all the parts I need through the same part systems that the car parts are in. You just different names. And what I couldn't find, I asked for help, and somebody, lo and behold, would come up with parts. Like I need a bell chamber, which is for a combustion chamber. Yeah, they find one, and I got it. So I went to launch my first big rocket out of my backyard. Not a good idea.
So you're what, 13 or something?
Well, what happened was I didn't like mowing grass. So I didn't think about it, but I thought I'm going to end the grass problem real quick. Because when this thing took off, it's full of liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. And it blew a flame the size of a football field. And it just incinerated the yard to nothing. So I didn't have to mow grass for a year. And it took off and it ripped out of there. And I remember the first time I launched it, all my friends come over to watch it. Because it's a big rocket, something, it's a big thing. In the backyard, kids getting ready to launch a rocket. So they're all standing down there from here to you from it. Because they're used to lighting bottle rockets, psh, boom, psh, I said, guys, you don't want to be down there. You want to come back up here. So they all came back up to me and said, well, why do we want to be all the way up here? It's way down there. It's about 100 yards away. I said, believe me, in a second, you'll see why we're up here. Because when that flames come out of that thing, it was enormous. It wasn't a rocket, it was a missile. And it left like a military missile. And it went up in the sky, disappeared, clear blue sky, and you could hear the thundering out in the distance. It's rolling thunder is what it is. And my mother was in the house. She saw everything in the house start shaking across the tables and stuff. That was my rocket leaving. And she remembered the last time she saw my friends, they were standing only like 3 feet from it. So she ran out the back door and asked me where my friends were. They were standing behind me. But see, we're not even allowed to play with matches. And I just incinerated the entire yard. So I turned around and looked. My mother asked, where's your friends? And they were gone. And I told her, I said, they're probably in the next county by now. So we were standing there watching that rocket take off and just go roaring clear out of sight.
So how did you know what kind of fuel, what kind of combination to come up with without the thing exploding?
It wasn't hard. There was a lot of books you could reference to. NASA was in the military, were forthcoming with propulsion systems and their quantities of fuel, their fuel ratios. It wasn't a big secret like it is today. They like sharing information, I guess. It's not like it used to be, but it wasn't hard to figure out. And all I had to do was just get some of the data runs on some of the stuff that went out of White Sands and just copy it basically. But I remember seeing that rocket roar clear out of sight. And it went, I had an altimeter system and a radio control system. I had built things inside the exhaust vanes of the rocket engines called jet avators, and you could remotely control them left or right, so you could steer the rocket. And so with getting all the data I would get from streamers before I launch, I knew what the wind drift was, and I could shoot a rocket 10 miles up and it'd come right back down right where we're standing. I got so good at it. And so I didn't like chasing rockets down. You know, if the sucker takes off, it ought to come back. And with wind drifts, it does. I remember some rockets that launched and went clear out of sight. When it came back, I would only run maybe 10, 20 feet from the pad and catch them on the parachute. So I got really good at pinpoint accuracy on that. And this first one went clear out of sight. I knew it was going to come back. And I remember asking my mother, why am I so weird? You know, why? My friends have ran away. I probably won't see them until next week. I said, why am I not like them? And then my mother said the strangest thing to me. She just looked at me and she said, I just want you to know you came through me, you didn't come from me. And I went, what the hell does that mean? So it wasn't until I was an older adult to figure that thing out. But I guess she was metaphorically speaking. But it was, I remember these rockets thundering out. And it later became a problem because, see, I was launching these rockets on sunny days. So people could see plumes. So I changed the fuel combinations and the temperature range till there was very little fumes. They were almost transparent. So you can't see it, but you can still hear it. You'd be standing there on a cloudless day and rolling thunder be going by. And people 12 miles away over in Mount Vernon be going, what the hell is that noise, you know? So I thought, man, I better fix that. And then I got another problem called FSS, Flight Service Stations. Those are the places where you log in your private planes and where you're flying to and from. Well, I didn't realize it, but I'm coming up on the radar at Port Columbus. Now they got Eastern Airlines don't exist anymore, but Eastern Airlines would fly over, and I thought, you know, they're at 30,000 feet. I'm pushing 50,000 feet. So I could drive a missile through a wing of a damn Eastern Airline. That would not be good. So I thought, I better do something about this. And they're starting to see it on radar. Because they'd be going, what are these streaks, you know, coming up off the ground? I said, hell, if we didn't know better, they look like rockets or missiles. So that was another problem I had to figure out. So I ground up asphalt in a rubber-based compound, and I added some other stuff to it, some particles, Inconel. And when I coated the rockets with it, and guess what happened? I guess when the radar waves came in, instead of bouncing off the rockets, the stuff absorbed it. So I built the first stealth rocket I ever heard of in 1966. So now you can't see the plume, you can't see it on radar, but you can still hear it. I can't do anything about that. So
all of this is happening, you're getting the dreams at that time?
Yeah, and all this is going on simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And which I thought was crazy. So I thought, well, it can't get no crazier than this thing's going on right now. Here I'm building car engines, winning races, can't tell anybody about. And now I'm building rockets that I'm flying 10, 12 miles up, and I got where you can't see the plumes and you can't see it on radar. Can't tell anybody about that now. So it's like dang, what is it that's going on here? So I figured something's going to give somewhere, and it does. My mother, God bless it, started in with her. My dad got injured in a bad accident, so he couldn't work. My mother had to go back to school at age 40. And she started off as a candy striper, as a person that helps nurses' aides. Then she became nurse aide. And then she went to college. And she became an LPN, a licensed practical nurse. They don't even give that degree anymore. Now it's either RN or nothing. So she became an LPN, and that was quite an accomplishment. But then, like me, I guess she just wasn't satisfied. In 1966, Mount Vernon, Ohio built this ICC unit, intensive care unit. In 1966, there was no such thing as an intensive care unit. This was the first one built in America. And it's privately owned. And my mother loved the 11 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning graveyard shift. So she was in charge of the ICC unit on third shift. And she was the first female to run an ICC unit in the country. So that's a little historical fact. And then it gets better. She's running the ICC unit, and it's in a very swanky, brand new hospital that's very expensive, so only the rich is there. So this old man comes in, I think he's 93 or 96, he's really old, and his name is Irving LeMay, and my mother puts him up in her unit. She comes on shift, and this old guy is mean as a snake. He, whenever the nurses bend over, he goose them, and he took a cane and hit one of them on the side of the head, about knocked her out, and she came back to the nurse's station. She had this big old whelp on the side of her face. My mother asked her what happened, and that old man hit her. My mother takes off down to the room. She grabs his cane, breaks across the end of the bed, takes the shot part and sticks it in his neck and said, "If you hit another nurse of mine, I will come back here and murder you, kill you dead, and say you had a heart attack." Well, guess what? Irving became my mother's next best friend. And they got to know each other, and then Irving had a son named Curtis LeMay. That is no other than 4-star General Curtis LeMay of the United States Air Force, founder of Strategic Air Command, our defense-capable systems, designer of the B-52 Stratofortress. He is the man next to John Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He's got his finger over the buttons. A little bit of a powerful person at the time, to say the least. He also had a paparazzi problem. So he wanted to see his dad, but he could only come in at 3 or 4 in the morning.
So by the paparazzi problem, you're saying he's a 4-star general serving...
Real popular.
And he can't go anywhere with that.
No, he can't. There's a parade following him all the time. So he wants to see his dad, but he can't because it'd be such a damn mess. So he has to go through my mother. He's got no choice. And old Stan Freeman said my mother was a caregiver. Well, technically she was, but not like some private caregiver. She's a nurse running the damn only ICC unit in the United States at the time. And her patient one of them happens to be Curtis LeMay, or Irving LeMay, father of Curtis. So Curtis has to go through my mother to see his dad. So he gets to know my mother on purpose. And then he finally asked her after several visits, he said, "You got any children?" And she goes, "Yeah, I got 3 boys. 2 of them are okay. The third one, we got to watch him. He's strange." And he goes, "How's he strange?" "He's always blowing up stuff." And LeMay goes, "What's he blow up?" "Rockets." And that catches his attention. He goes, He's doing what? He's blowing them up. He's launching them? Yeah, he launches them out in cow fields, and they go clear out of sight. They go 10 miles up, and he goes, what? He said, what's he doing it for? And my mother said, I haven't a clue why he's doing this. And then LeMay said, does he have a big book he writes things down in? Yeah, he's got a big notebook. Could you bring that notebook up here one night? Does he go to bed? He goes to bed at 11 o'clock, so he can go to school the next day. Yeah, I can bring the book up here and let you see it and get it back before he goes to school. And she did just that. Well, LeMay's looking at my book, and he turns to my mother and says, you got a copier? Well, he copies. Thank God he only copied about a third of it. And so he takes a handful of copies, and he goes to his, right next to his alma mater, Ohio State University. And he goes to this big group called Battelle Memorial Institute. Battelle is a giant think tank. It's a competitor of RAND. In 1968, they had 130 Nobel laureates on staff. Not too bad. Everything from thermonuclear physics to, you name it, aeronautics. So, LeMay knows people there, obviously, and he turns papers over and he said, is this just a bunch of gibberish, or is this of anything worth? Well, they take a look at it and they go, where is this person that's doing this? He said, it's just a high school kid out there shooting rockets off in cow fields. Is it something important? And they said, yeah, he's closing in on fusion containment. And LeMay goes, what's that? He's trying to contain a nuclear chain reaction, an H-bomb. And LeMay said, well, that's insane. Nothing can hold a H-bomb in a container. In this container, he can, because the electromagnetic fields are similar to black holes. And LeMay said, well, what's that mean? Black holes swallow suns out in space. Whole, complete, gone, never to be seen again. And what is the sun? It's hundreds of millions of H-bombs going off, continuously, simultaneously. And a black hole comes in, sucks it up, and it's gone. So he is onto something. And LeMay said, you're kidding, really? He said, we'd like to send these papers on to another place. We'd like to send it to a young guy who just graduated at Cambridge, England. He's sitting in Newton's chair. And he would love to look at this because it's in the similar work of his. So LeMay said, sure, send it. So they mail now my stuff is being mailed across the ocean, snail mail. The guy looks at it, he calls back and says, where is this person? He's in the local cow fields launching rockets. And they went, make an arrangement for me to meet him. I would come there anyhow for Ohio State, and I got to work at Battelle. So I'll be at Ohio State University and have him meet me there. So all this stuff's going on, and now my high school professor comes to me and he says, I got somebody I want you to meet over at my alma mater at Ohio State University. I said, okay. I don't know. So we get in a car the next day. We drive to Ohio State University. And we go in the university. And I remember, hot as heck outside. You get in these buildings, and they're so big, they're naturally cool anyhow. But they're too big to have air conditioning. But you walk on the floors, and it's old wooden planks that squeak and bubble. And in the doors is all this milk glass with chicken wire. This is old school stuff. And I went, dang, this place is kind of old, isn't it? So I walk we open this door, and there's an amphitheater. And way down at the bottom is this tiny desk, which actually is a big desk, but they're a long ways away. And there's a little guy sitting at the desk. And I'm looking at the blackboard. It's got stuff written all the way around it, all the way all the way around the room, around the entire theater. So I'm reading it and I said, who's messing with my math? And a little guy down there, he will stand up and says, your math indeed. And I went, so I kept reading. When I got up to here, I went, oh, you're looking for unified theory. I said, good luck with that. God almighty, I can't imagine somebody tackling a thing where they want to explain everything all at once with everything. And that's what unified theory is. You know, Einstein went probably crazy trying to figure it out and killed over. And this guy obviously is on the same track, and I'm going, so I ran around the room. When I got back down to where he was, I went, and that down there is not going to work. And he goes, how do you know? I've tried it. So I went down there, I erased it, and he said, wait a minute. I said, hold on a minute, try this. So I wrote this out, and he's reading it, and he looks at me and he says, how did you validate that? I said, rocket engine. And then the next question told me how smart he was. He said, well, how'd you contain the fields? And I said, I can't. I don't have enough smarts for that. I don't know how to close the fields. They just run onto an endless loop. And he said, oh. And I said, you know anybody knows how to fix that? And he says, no, I don't. So I said, well, I'm going to go. So I start to leave. He said, wait a minute. Where do you get all your ideas from? I said, they're coming through dreams. Now I'm walking away. And he says, where are you going now? Well, you don't want to talk to some idiot that dreams this crap and builds this stuff. And he said, I get the same kind of dreams. Yeah, I do want to talk to you. Sit down. Hi, my name is Stephen Hawkins.
So this is Stephen Hawking, the famous astrophysicist.
Right, I always call him Stephen, but Stephen Hawkins.
Right.
He was in the Cambridge University. He was in Newton's chair. He was 19 when I met him.
And you were how old at that time? Was it 66?
Oh, me, I was only like 12 or 13.
So this is 1966 you met him?
Yeah, 1966. I was 65, I think. But he could walk and talk. He was very frail, had a cane. But he wasn't messed up like we all knew him today. He was fun to talk to. I had a really good time talking to him. And after we met then, we talked for years and years afterwards.
And he was having similar experiences to you, having these dreams and
yeah,
his
he
theories
was being bugged like I was. Like something's trying to tell him something, but like me, I don't get it. We both looked at each other and thought, we're probably two of the dumbest, smartest people we ever met. I said, yeah, I sure feel that way. Because I don't get it what I'm supposed to. And he's pointing to all the boards. He says, well, I'm not getting much further. But I really liked the guy. He just was a nice man. Smart. God almighty, he was smart. Had a good sense of humor. Would rib you all the time. If he could take a barb and get at you, he would. He'd never miss a chance. Quick wit. Like an Alan Alda type person.
He's known for being more a theoretical physicist, but you were doing practical physics.
Yeah, that's what we thought was interesting with each other, because I always said, well, you think it up, I'll pull out the toolbox, I'll build it. And that really was quite accurate. I was on the applied side, he was on the theoretical side. But he had some problems with his math. I helped him with that. And I remember one person said, wait a minute, you got a phone call from Hawkins and you're helping him with his math? Who the hell are you? You know, I said, a freak of nature maybe, I don't know. But yeah, you know what, when he was young, they didn't have a lot of money. And when they went to the beach, he said, we went to the beach in a wagon. Well, we had a 1955 DeSoto station wagon. So I was thinking station wagon. No, he said, back up a little further, David. Put a horse on a gypsy cart. That's the wagon. I went, really? Oh, how cool. So you went to the beach when you were a kid In a gypsy wagon? He said, yeah. Now
So over the years, you would communicate with Stephen Hawking by phone, not letters or anything?
No, we would do it by phone. And then he got to where he couldn't use his arms much. And that's why I told him about the page turner we made for astronauts. And then his voice box went. And then he went over to the synthesizer voice, which was weird, like talking to an android or a robot. But I could still hear the wit and humor in him. And that didn't change. But I felt bad for him because with the MSMD, he had both. And his body was literally melting, but his brain was intact. So he knew what was going on with him every day. That had to be horrible. Had to be terrifying. You're melting away, and you know it.
But in 1966, I mean, he was acting in this kind of consultancy role with the Battelle Institute.
Yeah.
And they verified what he was doing with the rockets.
Well, his brain was still sharp. And
so I'm with David Adair. It is November 29 for the discussion of his extraordinary life, and he is starting off with his background. And David, why don't you continue with some of the documentation you have to show?
Well, yeah, it's one thing to tell you I did this, I did that, but let's look at what I was doing. This was when I was 13 years old, and this was the first known pictures I ever had made of rockets I was using. And these were the smaller rockets. This one I used for streamers. But they're easier to put in a picture than something that's 10 feet tall and weighs a ton. So then as my continued rocketry went on, nobody in the community had rockets. Not like today where everybody has model rockets or whatever. So I introduced model rockets to the local kids, my fellow friends. And let's see, that's me up here. But I'm showing them how to build rockets. And we'd have rocket meets where we'd get there, gather, and everybody would fly their rockets. And because I was doing the rockets, the school science teachers said, you should enter your rockets into the science fairs. So I did, and man, did it take off then. I started winning awards after awards. These two awards here are from the Ohio Academy of Sciences.
And what date are those awards?
Let's see, these dates, ready? Let's see.
So we're talking around 65, 66, is that?
Yeah.
So you're in high school at this time?
Right, let me put my eyeballs on. I was actually junior high.
Oh, junior high, yeah. So you're building the rockets junior high, winning awards.
Let's see, this one was, the Ohio Academy of Sciences, April something. Let's see what this one says. Second day of March, 1969. So this is 1970. So 69, 70.
You're 15, 16
right.
at that time.
Here in 1971, this was a little different award. This came from Dow.
You want to show it to the camera?
Yeah, this one was, it was a wooden plaque, and it was from Dow Chemical Company. And Dow gave it to me because I beat them in a rocket formula. And they said, you're in junior high and you beat us in a rocket competition with the Air Force for rocket formula? I said, yeah. Well, we're going to give you our award. Because they said, that's the dangest thing we ever heard of. So I ended up getting this from Dow Chemical Company for rocket formula. And then won another Ohio Academy of Sciences. And then in 1971, that's when things started going a little bit strange. If things weren't strange enough, this is when the big ones started, the biggest one of them all. And this turned out to be a full-size missile. I mean, this thing was 15 feet tall, weighed a ton. And it was a different kind of engine. Up to this point in the world, we only had liquid fuel and solid fuel rocket engines. This one was neither one. It was something else.
And how did you build that? 1971. Were you building this now at another facility rather than using NASCAR facilities?
I'm glad you brought that up, because now the story is going to change. What happened was, I went as far as I could go with conventional rockets, liquid fuel and solid fuel, and I learned everything I could off of them. What I was really learning was not the engines, but I was learning the aerodynamics, the aeronautical side of rockets, center of gravity, specific impulse, all this stuff, apogees, perigees, learn everything about rocketry. And it wasn't the engines I thought I was focusing on, but it was telling me how to get ready to build a vehicle that would accept a different type of engine. And the different type engine came in a later date. What happened was, General LeMay was not idle all this time. He was coming out to visit me. He'd come out to my test shop, see engines work.
And he's retired at this time, so he's a retired force.
No, he's still active.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, he was still active. But he's going to retire in a few months. And the reason he's retiring is because he got fired. He was up to his eyeballs in Vietnam. And he was getting tired of the Vietnamese not coming to the Paris peace talks. So he's the one that said, if you don't come to the peace talks, I'll bomb you back into the Stone Age. If you remember, that was a famous quote. And next day he was fired. He was fired as Joint Chiefs by Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense. And he said, you can't talk like that. Well, you know what? That's another story. But I got involved with that whole situation later on. It's how I ended up on a crutch. It was a dogfight I got into afterwards. But anyway, LeMay said, yeah, I'll bind me back into the Stone Age. So McNamara just fired him outright. And if you have ever seen a picture of LeMay, I have a book in there called Iron Eagle. It's an autobiography. And you ought to look at that picture of him. And you look at that picture and go, that man is only 46 years old. He's been fired. He's the head of the Joint Chiefs. 4-star general. That's not somebody you fire and they're just going to lay down and quit. He's far from being over with. So they fire him, but he quits at the same time. Don't know which is which. And he runs for president of the United States. He runs for vice president of the United States. He is running with George Wallace. George Wallace runs for president of the United States. He is his vice president candidate. They're running against Hubert Humphrey and I think Nixon. So anyway, the timing of this is real critical. So
it was 1968.
Yeah, so 1968, election year. This is November. They have the vote. Well, they don't win. Instead, the presidential candidate, who is, I forgot his name, he gets shot. They shoot him.
Robert Kennedy?
No. George Wallace. He's shot. He's a bigot. They just had nothing. They shoot him in a crowd. Well, now LeMay is sitting there, and he has been fired, and his presidential running candidate's just been shot. Full of holes. He can't run. So this is November. So it's quiet in December, Christmas. Then January 6th, my birthday, I get a knock on the front door. Open the door, and there standing a full bird colonel in uniform. He goes, I'm Colonel Arthur Bailey Williams. I'm XO for General LeMay. General LeMay has now decided what he's going to do. What just happened? The election happened. Quiet for the month of December. January starting. LeMay starts up again. And this time, he is going to go at an entirely different way. So he may be retired, but all the corporations, the Iron Triad, they see him as a 4-star general still in power. So he barks and people jump. So he's going to put that to work. And he does. And he has a grand plan. And it's not until a year or two later that I understand what the plan is. I put it together myself. But what he did, since he's divorced himself with Robert McNamara, he is going to come back and he is going to use his political influence, get the right Senate subcommittees on science and technology, which runs NASA and the Iron Triad and all that. And what he's going to do is what he asked McNamara to do, and he didn't want to, and that is ditch all the B-52s, buy up 45 XB-70 Valkyries, replace the B-52s with them, put them all in a fail-safe pattern, and in the belly of the XB-70s will be my rocket engine. Well, what good would that be? The bombers are flying at fail-safe just outside the airspace of Soviet Union. They're ordered to go in. They go in. The Soviets in a few minutes see them coming in. They go, and then they see something streaking out from the bombers. My rocket moving at Mach 37. Not Mach 3, but Mach 37. So the Soviets would look at their screens, they see these streaks, and they would say, what's that? Or by the time they get watts out, they're vaporized. First strike has struck. And they're coming in from the Valkyries on the wings of my rocket. At Mach 37, it's not so fast, there ain't nothing to do but die. So you effectively have destroyed every ground deterrent that the Soviet Union has. Well, you know what's two more things you have to do the same day? You're going to have to burn about 500 million Chinamen to death. Because they ain't going to sit there and not do nothing. So you have to take them out. Now you have over 1 billion souls dead. And you still got the Soviet subs, which more than capable of killing over 1/3 of America. However, according to LeMay and his people, and his war planners, 30-35% of the lost population is acceptable. And I'm going, not if you're in the 30 or 35%, it won't be. I said, that's insane. You can't win first strike. Unless you blow half the planet away, you still got subs in the oceans. You can't get them all. There's going to be retaliation. It's going to be just, a bloodbath. A nuclear bloodbath. And
so how did LeMay get the idea of your rocket engine being part of the Valkyrie? I mean, how did we get to that point?
Oh, that's a good question. We jumped something. Go all the way back to
You have the colonel showing up saying,
right.
You can have, he's there and he's going to help you.
That's what we jumped.
Yes.
Good catch. He caught that. So Colonel Williams standing there on my front porch and he said, I'm here with, literally, he's in so many words, what he's saying is, I'm standing here with carte blanche for you. LeMay wants to do your rocket, whatever we need to do to make it happen, tell me. Well, I started down a list this long. I already wrote out a grocery list. I said, I need all this stuff. And we got to talk about facility. So they looked over at my garage, which what it was, it used to be an irony with Richard Petty and all that. It used to be a Chrysler dealership. Went defunct. And my parents bought the property and they have the house on the end of it to the far right. But the main facility, the dealership building, is right in the middle, and that's where I'm living. Because we made an apartment in there. I had my own kitchen, my own bathroom. I just lived in the thing. So the Air Force comes in, they look at it, Colonel Williams looks at it and he goes, it wouldn't take much to convert this building into a full-blown aeronautical lab with all this equipment that he's holding the list of. He said that building's big enough to hold. It was a huge building.
And we're talking around 1970, 1971. This is after you've won these awards in high school.
Right. This is 1970. And so they show up, and the Air Force shows up. And the minute they showed up, I said, we got a problem. What's the problem? You got to get everybody out of the fatigues and uniforms. I mean, I got to live here. How am I going to explain my property crawling with Air Force personnel, trucks, there's logos everywhere, American flags? I mean, you can't be doing this. I got to live here. So William said, I can fix that. Next day, they all show up in blue jeans and plaid shirts and baseball caps. Look just like farmers. And they start remodeling my building, and they're done in a week. I mean, there must have been, 500 damn people on the property at one time. People asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm just remodeling. They said, damn, you got a lot of friends, don't you? Yeah, I do. So we get it all built, and it's nice. It's so complete. There's a fake sliding wall in the garage that moves back, and you go into the lab. Or you wheel something out of the lab, and the wall goes back. And you never know, and it's all still inside the big bay area, so you never see anything. So it's just a perfect layout. Really
Did you take photos of the lab?
Huh?
Did you take photos of the lab?
Yes, I did.
Lab so we can look at those?
I've got single photos of it.
Perfect.
But it's a big facility building, and everybody just looks at it and goes, "Oh, that's the old defunct dealership." Yeah, it is, but it's something else right now. It's the damn state-of-the-art missile shop. So it. Here's another funny incident. Phone rings. It's LeMay. I pick it up. I talk to him. Hey, General, how you doing? And this old woman, I think her name is Sissy, she gets on the line. It's a friggin' party line. I bet most people don't even remember a party line. A party line's where there's like 10 households on the same phone line. We all shared the bill. That's the way it used to be, called party lines. And LeMay's going, who's on this line? And this woman says, this is Sissy Cartwright now. I gotta get my daughter to cheerleading practice. I don't need to hear his stupid rocket shit. And LeMay goes off, man. He goes, this is a party line? Not for long. Next day, all these men show up with telephone poles, trucks, drill bits, augers. They install new poles and new lines right into the house, a private line. And I'm going, damn. It was so fast nobody hardly even noticed it, so I didn't have to explain it. They asked what we were doing. I said, we got an extension line. Yeah, we did. We have a private, secured line. Now when I pick up the phone and talk to whoever, it's direct into Wright-Patterson or direct into Washington, D.C. I mean, it's next thing to a president's telephone line. So I'm talking to LeMay, and he says, ain't no damn more sissy Cartwrights on this fucking line, is there? I said, no, I don't think so. So, no sissy, never knew we just thought we stopped using the line. In a way we did, we put up our own line. But my God, what that would have cost somebody. You know, all the telephone poles and wires and cherry picker trucks and all that stuff.
But look, General LeMay was doing all of this because he recognized something about your fusion containment engine that was unique.
It's a critical component to his first strike. So he needs me, and he needs PITHM. And so whatever...
And what is PITHM?
PITHM is the name of my rocket, and I skipped that part too. Very few people ever heard this story. I'm in there working on my rocket. My mother comes in. And she's just standing there, and I'm working, and finally I just don't even look at her and go, "Well, you gotta tell me." She said, "I just had this dream." And I'm like, that catches my attention every time. "Yeah, what's with your dream?" She goes, "I saw you in the future." "How far in the future?" "Pretty good ways." She said, "You were in a desert. There was these giant grandstands that people were sitting in. There was this railroad track running between the grandstands and out across the desert floor." "Yeah." "Then this big locomotive, 3 or 4 locomotives, is pushing this giant rocket ship laying on its side, and it rolls up between the grandstands, and there's a scaffolding built up at the top, and the door opens on the rocket, and you step out." "Well, how you know it's me?" "Well, all your hair's gone except what's left is all gray. So I look like a gray Friar Tuck. That's comforting." She said, "Yeah, you were a lot thinner too." So she said, "You came out and you welcomed everybody for coming to see this demonstration of a new type of rocket engine. And you get back inside, you close the doors. The trains push the thing about a mile away. Then the trains come back, the locomotives." She said, "That thing turns its engines on. First, it's small engines on the sled that is sliding across the rails." And I thought, that's pretty ingenious. Uses smaller motors, solid rocket motors, probably drive the thing, get it up to speed. And then it went up a side of a mountain. And I thought, wow, talk about raising the inclination on it and not having to spend any energy. It's going up side of a mountain, being driven by the motors. So I thought, damn. Then she said the main engines came on, and it was so bright, like your dad's welder. We can't look at it. Everybody's got dark shields looking at it. And it went up the side of the mountain, and then she said it was like gone, just a lightning flash. And the only thing left was a rainbow trail. I said, "Rainbow trail, what kind of colors?" She said, "Oh, they were purple, green, and blue, and like the colors of a prism." And I thought, damn, she described an electromagnetic fusion containment engine perfectly, detonating inside an atmosphere, because it will ionize all the atmosphere into the colors of the rainbow. How the hell did she know that? And I asked her, I said, "How do you know how an electromagnetic engine works?" She goes, "I don't know, I'm just telling you what I saw." I'm a little bit taken back by it, like, damn, that's too much detail. She ain't guessing, she's just recalling. And I said, "Is there anything else?" She goes, "Oh, one other thing." "What?" "I wrote it down. There was a name spelled on the side of the rocket." "What?" "Here it is, PITHOLEM. PITHM." I said, "What's that?" She goes, "That's its name." So I called in the artist, same day, have him paint PITHM on the damn side of the rocket.
And what does PITHM mean?
I have no idea. I have tried to find that word. Go out and try to find the word. It does not exist in any human-based language. I've had linguistics from MIT to Harvard trying to find it. They can't find it. We came close to it one day, only one letter difference. Instead of PIT, it was PYT. PITHM, and you know what that is? It'll raise the hair off of you. It's the name of the arrows coming out of Apollo's scab, and it's the fastest thing known in the universe.
I see.
And I went,
Yep, I think that you got it.
I said, Jesus God, that's incredible.
Wow.
And I said, of all things to pick for a word and get that close, you're one letter off, and it describes the fastest thing in the universe, which is, right now to us, PITHM is the fastest thing that's ever moved. So
it operates on the principle of an electromagnetic
fusion containment.
Millennials
don't like that. They said it's too long and complicated. They shorten it down, but they shorten it down being technically correct. They said, you know what your engine is? I said, what? A star in a jar. I went, oh my God, that's technically correct. What a cool name. So I said, who coined that? Anybody know? They didn't know. Well, tell whoever coined it, thank you, because I am going to trademark it. And I traded it in Secretary of North Carolina. My business is Star in the Jar Incorporated. So that was a great name. I couldn't have come up with that. That's brilliant, whoever did it. So now PITHM, rolling out under the name of Star in the Jar Incorporated, she is the fastest thing I ever seen in my life.
And I think, PITHM, you actually had a newspaper report about an award you won with the launch of PITHM.
Yeah, it's lit. Oh, God, yes, you're right. Proof how long ago I had it trademarked. I stamped that thing out back in 1970. So somebody's going to have to come up with something on paper, official, before 1970 if they want to claim it, that PITHM is their word. That's mine. That came straight from my mother's dream.
Right, and that was in a newspaper report.
Yeah, I put it in there because I wanted it trademarked. And that stamped it with the newspaper story.
Yes, and there were a number of newspaper stories.
Yeah, they copied it. So the word is used, which means it's mine. It was my mother's. She's her dream. And
that, of course, was built with the assistance of these Air Force technicians.
Absolutely.
That
without them, it would not have been made. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the money or the horsepower. I remember.
And you're 17 or something
right.
at this age.
And I couldn't have ordered stuff that. Hell, I looked at the crates that came in of things I ordered. They were from Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Lawrence, Livermore. Where are you going to get the horsepower to order stuff from them? You could have all the money in the world and go, I want these things. They ain't going to give it to you. But LeMay could get it. So I wrote down the damn addresses because I didn't know what the parts were. They had compartmentalized it so well, nobody knew what all these parts were for except for me, because I'm the guy assembling it. Other than me, no one knew this is a rocket engine. You know, they had a thermobaric pressure valve, and it's going to PITHM. That's all you know. You don't know anything else. Well, what's that for? I don't know. Could be used on 100 different things. A rocket? Yeah. Could be used on a jet. Could be used on all kinds of things. So they were really smart the way they did this. And once I got it all put together, that's another thing. We had to get it from Mount Vernon, Ohio to White Sands, New Mexico proving grounds. That was another problem. And that started another whole shebang. I remember putting PITHM in the semi, and then on the side of the semi, so help me God, they dropped the words Piggly Wiggly. Grocery store. It's a grocery store delivery. And all the trucks had different names, you know, and I went, oh my God. So we get down there with the Piggly Wiggly. I remember making a joke. I said, is there a bigger version called Hoggly Woggly? And nobody laughed. But we got down to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. And we pull up at the gate. I sat in the semi and said, Piggly Wiggly. I said, all I said was this: I am the kid that General LeMay is expecting with his package. And they relayed that, and they came back lightning fast. Gates flew open, guards, all these guns and stuff backed up. We drove over to the C-141 Starlifter. You ever seen one of them things? They don't even make them anymore. 4-engine, giant damn thing. Looked like it could eat a 747. It's sitting there, and it's waiting, and PITHM loads right up inside it. There's a perimeter of blue berets, all with M16s. Their backs are to me, because I'm inside the circle with the plane. And I'm looking around and going, oh, this is for me and my rocket. Ain't that some shit? So I sit down in the crew compartment of the Starlifter behind the cockpit. So I sit down back there, and I said, we're leaving. We're heading to White Sands. And off we go. And that's how we got out of there. People back in those years always saw C-141 Starlifters coming and going out of Wright-Patterson. And I didn't know at the time, but Hangar 17 and all that stuff was there. I mean, I was right in the thick of it and didn't even know it. I'm on my way to Area 51 and don't know it.
Well, before we talk about Area 51 and White Sands, at that point when PITHM is being shipped to White Sands for that test to Area 51, did General LeMay tell you what his plans were in terms of a first strike?
Well, I asked him. I finally put it all together. And when I put it together was with Colonel Williams. Colonel Williams, he had to know, but he wouldn't tell me. But I could tell he was always troubled by it, because he kept saying I was such a nice person. Hell, I'm building the Armageddon for the planet is what I'm doing. And I don't even know it. I think I'm going to be building, faster than light speed travel for everybody. Yeah, we're going to go at light speed into Armageddon is what we're going to do. So finally I asked LeMay, I looked at everything around me and I went, what is going on with this? This is not, there's nothing normal about this project. I seem to have carte blanche wherever I go. People just jump out of my way when I say who I am. And I'm a nobody. I'm a realist. I'm not Mr. Wonderful, Mr. Great. No, I'm just somebody who knows how to build some extraordinary shit. And look at the stuff that's happening, because there's an agenda being pushed here. And I said, let me try to put some of this together. I'm building something that's so damn fast, nothing on God's earth could ever catch it. You don't plan to write it anywhere. So what I have is a delivery system of enormous speed. And the only thing I can think of is that I've heard the terms several times from several groups of people talking, and they're calling this a first strike project. And I thought, first strike, was it some kind of baseball game? No. You're planning to wipe out an entire nation of somebody's, and you're going to do it so fast they don't even know it's going to happen. And I think I know what you're going to do. I think you're going to get rid of the B-52s, put the Valkyries in place, and then put PITHM in the Valkyries, and then launch onto the Soviet Union. First strike, and you'll blow the entire land base of Soviet Union into dust. But then you got the subs to worry about, but you all don't seem to worry about that. I said, all of this is insane from start to finish.
And these Valkyrie XBs, they were an experimental craft at the time.
Yeah,
that could be used for this first strike weapon or launching.
Absolutely. Well, think about it. It was built in 1958. It cruises at 80,000 to 85,000 feet. We got nothing could go that high today. And it cruises at a speed of 2,000 miles an hour. We got nothing that speed. The B-1 can't even get that high or that fast. This thing would blow right by it, and it's from 1958. Where the hell did it come from? I don't know. But there it is. You got the Valkyrie. Valkyrie sweeps the B-52s out of the way. which at that time they were about 30 years old. Now they're over 60, they're 70 years old. Longest running warfare aircraft in history. Normally they only last 6 or 7 years. My F-14's made for 26, that's not bad. But this damn thing's at 70, my age, and still going. So I don't know. But if you would drop that combination I just mentioned together, you got a first strike formula that would work.
So this is weighing in the back of your mind.
Yeah,
this is
like
your PITHM is going to be used. As
I thought if they take this thing from me, and Von Braun warned me. He warned me. He said there was a picture of him and Operation Paperclip, and he put his finger right onto the forehead of Arthur Rudolph. And he said, "See that little guy?" I said, "Yeah." You don't want to ever meet him.
So when did this warning happen with Dr. Vernon von Braun?
Oh my God, that's a long story. That goes all the way back to June 16th, 1969. We launch Apollo 11. That's when Von Braun and I physically met for the first time. We had known of each other for a long time, but I met him there. And another crazy story how that all happened. Anyway, he said, if you meet that man, you are in serious trouble, and if you got a project, it is gone. And Von Braun was voice of a prophet. He nailed it to the wall. Because we got to White Sands, we were there one day. I had PITHM out on the floor checking all of her stuff. And here comes a black DC-9. And it lands. And I make a joke. I said, "Where's the white bunny head?" The white bunny head on a black DC-9, that's Hugh Hefner, that's Playboy. And nobody laughed. And I thought Leif Williams would laugh. He's not laughing. They're just staring at the DC-9. I said, "What is this?" And he was quiet, and then he saw the people coming out of the back. All these guys in black suits, white shirts, little black ties, mirror sunglasses. And then the last guy come off was wearing khaki shorts. And blonde hair, blue-eyed Arthur Rudolph.
Let's stop part one right here.
Okay.
And we will resume with the story with Dr. Arthur Rudolph and how PITHM was then test flighted from White Sands to Area 51.
Yeah, it's quite a story.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.